Professor Zixith adjusted the holographic display with one of his forearms, while his students settled into their biopods around the circular classroom. The Galactic Military Academy's Advanced Combat Studies course always drew the brightest minds from across 12 species, and today's lesson promised to be particularly enlightening. Today we examine a newly discovered combat simulation from a species that recently achieved faster-than-light travel, Zixith announced, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. The humans of Earth have provided us with what they claim are historical combat recordings for academic study. A ripple of interest passed through the classroom. Cadet Veltar, a towering Krillian with crystalline skin, raised her primary manipulator. "Professor, how advanced are their simulation technologies? Their species only achieved FTL 3 cycles ago." Zixith's eye stalk swiveled thoughtfully. "An excellent question. According to their data files, these recordings span several hundred of their years, using increasingly sophisticated capture methods. We'll analyze their tactical evolution and combat psychology." The first recording began to play. The image showed a muddy battlefield where humans in primitive fabric uniforms charged across an open field. Explosions erupted around them, sending bodies flying through the air. The students watched with academic interest as the humans continued advancing, despite watching their companions fall. "Note the inefficient tactical approach," Zixith commented. "Direct frontal assault with minimal cover? Observe how they maintain formation despite significant casualties." Cadet Thrix, a multi-limbed Vorthak, chittered in confusion. "Professor, their combat AI seems remarkably primitive. Why don't the simulated soldiers seek better cover?" "Remember, this represents an early period in their tactical development," Zixith replied. "Notice how they prioritize group cohesion over individual survival. Fascinating programming choice for a simulation." The scene shifted to show humans crawling through trenches filled with water and filth. Their faces were gaunt, eyes hollow with exhaustion. When the call came to attack, they climbed out of their protective positions and ran toward enemy lines through a hellscape of barbed wire and machine gun fire. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their pods. The violence was more graphic than typical military simulations, but they assumed it was meant to demonstrate the brutality of inefficient combat methods. "The attention to detail is remarkable," observed Cadet McCoth, her tentacles writhing with interest. "The psychological modeling shows extreme stress responses, yet the units maintain combat effectiveness." The recording jumped forward in time. Now humans wore different uniforms and carried more advanced weapons. They stormed beaches under heavy fire, many falling before they reached the sand. Those who survived continued inland, stepping over their dead to capture strategic positions. "This simulation seems designed to showcase human persistence," Zixith noted. "Despite tactical disadvantages and heavy losses, they achieve their objectives through sheer determination." The next sequence showed urban combat. Humans moved through destroyed cities, fighting building by building. They displayed remarkable adaptability, using rubble for cover and improvising weapons from debris. When cornered, they fought with whatever they could find, knives, rocks, even their bare hands. Cadet Veltar's crystals flickered with confusion. "Professor, the damage modeling is incredibly sophisticated. Each injury appears to have lasting effects on combat performance, yet they continue fighting. What's the purpose of such detailed suffering simulation? Perhaps to demonstrate the importance of proper medical support and equipment," Zixith suggested, though he was beginning to feel uneasy about the recording's intense realism. The timeline advanced again. Humans now fought in jungles, their uniforms rotting in the humidity. They faced an enemy that seemed to melt into the vegetation, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The humans adapted, learning to move silently through terrain that would challenge most galactic species. They developed new tactics, new weapons, new ways of thinking about warfare. What struck the students most was the humans' faces. Despite the fear in their eyes, they pressed forward. They carried wounded comrades to safety under fire. They shared their rations with those who had none. They told jokes in the midst of horror. "The psychological programming is unprecedented," whispered Cadet Thrix. "They've modeled individual personalities, relationships, even humor as a coping mechanism." The final sequence of the class showed modern human combat. Soldiers in advanced armor moved through alien-looking terrain, their weapons firing bursts of energy. They coordinated with orbital support, used sophisticated electronics, and demonstrated tactical awareness that impressed even these advanced military cadets. But what remained constant was their fundamental approach to combat. They still charged into danger to save their comrades. They still fought when wounded. They still found ways to laugh in the darkness. As the recording ended, the classroom fell silent. Professor Zixith noticed that several students looked disturbed, their usual academic enthusiasm replaced by something approaching unease. "The simulation raises interesting questions about human military doctrine," he said, trying to regain the scholarly atmosphere. "Their willingness to accept casualties in pursuit of objectives seems to exceed normal tactical parameters." Cadet McCoth's tentacles had gone pale. "Professor, the level of detail in these simulations, the way they portrayed death and injury, it seemed almost too real." "Advanced programming often creates that impression," Zixith replied, though privately he was beginning to share their concerns. "Human simulation technology may be more sophisticated than we initially assessed." Cadet Veltar raised her manipulator again. "Professor, I noticed something odd in the metadata. The recordings show specific dates, names, and locations. Host combat simulations use generic identifiers." Zixith paused. He had noticed the same thing, but had assumed it was simply an elaborate backstory created for the simulation. "Humans do seem to prefer detailed world-building in their entertainment media." "But sir," Thrix interjected, "some of those place names correspond to actual locations on Earth. I cross-referenced them with our survey data." The professor's eye stalks froze. He quickly pulled up his own database and began checking the locations mentioned in the recordings. To his growing alarm, every single one matched real places on the human homeworld. "Perhaps they based their simulation on historical events," he said weakly. The students exchanged glances. Cadet McCoth's voice was barely above a whisper. "Professor, what if these aren't simulations at all?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Professor Zixith stared at the now blank holographic display, his mind racing through the implications. He had shown his students what he believed were sophisticated combat simulations. But if McCoth was right, if these recordings were real, "Class dismissed," he said abruptly. "We'll continue our analysis next cycle." As the students filed out in unusual silence, Professor Zixith remained alone with his growing dread. He needed to contact the Earth liaison immediately, but part of him was terrified of what he might discover. Ambassador Sarah Chen received the urgent communication from the Galactic Military Academy at 300 hours, Earth Standard Time. She had been the human liaison to the Galactic Council for 2 years, but she had never received such a panicked message from an alien professor before. "Ambassador Chen," Professor Zixith's translated voice crackled through the quantum communicator. "I must speak with you immediately about the historical combat recordings your government provided for our curriculum." Sarah rubbed her eyes and reached for her coffee. "Of course, Professor. Is there a problem with the video quality?" "We tried to enhance the older footage as much as possible." There was a long pause. "Ambassador, my students and I have been analyzing these recordings as combat simulations. However, some concerning details have emerged that suggest they might be documentation of actual events." Sarah's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "Professor, I'm not sure I understand." "Of course they're actual events. We sent you historical footage from our major conflicts as requested for your military history course." The silence that followed was so long that Sarah thought the connection had failed. Finally, Zixith's voice returned, smaller and more uncertain than she had ever heard it. "Ambassador, when we requested human combat data, our translation protocols indicated we were asking for combat simulations, training scenarios, fictional representations of military tactics." The coffee mug slipped from Sarah's fingers and shattered on the floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Professor, what exactly did you show your students?" "Footage spanning several hundred years of human warfare," Zixith replied, his voice trembling. "From primitive projectile weapons to modern energy-based combat. We observed tens of thousands of human casualties and assumed they were sophisticated holographic representations." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Galactic Council had strict regulations about exposing member species to graphic violence. Most civilized species had evolved beyond warfare centuries or millennia ago. They studied conflict only in abstract theoretical terms. "Professor, I need to ask you something very important," Sarah said carefully. "When your species achieved spaceflight, how long had it been since your last military conflict?" Approximately 8,000 cycles, Zixth replied. Our last war ended when we developed effective conflict resolution protocols. Most species abandon warfare once they achieve sufficient technological and social advancement. Sarah closed her eyes. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel less than 5 years after their last major military engagement. While other species had millennia of peace before reaching the stars, humans had brought their capacity for violence with them into space. Professor, we need to contain the situation immediately, Sarah said. How many students witnessed these recordings? 47 cadets from 12 different species, Zixith replied. But Ambassador, that's not the most concerning issue. The footage showed humans continuing to fight despite severe injuries, charging into certain death to protect their companions, and displaying tactical adaptability that exceeded our models of rational behavior. Sarah's heart sank. She knew exactly which battles Zixith had probably shown. The footage would have included everything from World War I trench warfare to modern special operations. To species that had never experienced real violence, it must have looked like humans were unstoppable killing machines. What was their reaction? She asked, dreading the answer. Initially, they were impressed by what they believed was sophisticated simulation technology. However, as the violence escalated and the human responses became more extreme, they became uncomfortable. When we realized these were actual events, several students required psychological counseling. Sarah began pacing her office. Professor, I need you to understand something about human history. What you showed your students represents our worst moments, not our typical behavior. We've spent centuries learning to control our aggressive instincts. But Ambassador, Zixth interrupted, the footage showed humans repeatedly choosing to sacrifice themselves for others. They shared resources with wounded comrades. They risked their lives to recover fallen companions. This suggests a level of species loyalty that our sociologists find disturbing. Disturbing? Sarah asked, confused. In galactic society, individual preservation is the primary biological imperative. We cooperate because it serves our personal interests. But humans appear to genuinely value other humans' lives above their own survival. This level of altruistic behavior, combined with your species' combat capabilities, creates a psychological profile that... Zixith's voice trailed off, but Sarah understood. That makes us look like a warrior species with pack loyalty that could pose a threat to galactic security. The students are calling you the species that brought war to space, Zixith confirmed quietly. They're terrified that humans might apply these same tactics against other member species. Sarah slumped into her chair. Humanity had spent years proving they were peaceful enough to join the Galactic Council. They had submitted to extensive psychological evaluations, demonstrated their diplomatic capabilities, and shown their commitment to nonviolent conflict resolution. All of that progress was now threatened by a simple misunderstanding. Professor, what would it take to correct this misconception? She asked. I'm not certain it can be corrected, Zixith admitted. The footage is deeply disturbing to species that have never experienced violence. The fact that humans not only survived such conflicts but learned to coordinate increasingly sophisticated military operations suggests an adaptation to warfare that other species find incomprehensible. Sarah thought about her own grandfather, who had fought in 3 different conflicts before becoming a teacher. He had taught her that the greatest strength wasn't the ability to fight, but the wisdom to know when fighting was necessary and when it wasn't. Professor, would it help if I arranged for some of our military historians to speak with your students? People who can explain the context behind these conflicts and how we've evolved beyond them? That might be beneficial, Zixith replied uncertainly. But Ambassador, you must understand that what we've observed challenges fundamental assumptions about species development. Most civilizations abandon violence before achieving significant technological advancement. Humans appear to have weaponized their technology while maintaining their capacity for organized warfare. Sarah realized the true scope of the problem. It wasn't just about correcting a misunderstanding. The Galactic Council's entire model of species development assumed that technological advancement and peaceful evolution went hand in hand. Humanity represented an anomaly that threatened their understanding of how civilization should develop. Professor, I'm going to need a complete list of which students viewed the footage and which species they represent, Sarah said. This information will likely spread beyond your classroom. I've already received inquiries from other professors asking about the human warrior documentation, Zixith confirmed. The Academy's entire Advanced Combat Studies department wants copies of the recordings. Sarah's blood ran cold. If the footage spread throughout the Galactic Military Academy, it would reach officer candidates from every major species in the Council. Within months, every military leader in known space would view humans as a potential threat. "Professor, I need you to classify those recordings immediately," Sarah said urgently. "Don't allow anyone else to view them until we can provide proper context." "I'll do what I can," Zixith replied. "But several students have already requested permission to share the footage with their home militaries for analysis." Sarah ended the communication and immediately began drafting an emergency report to Earth Command. Humanity's reputation in galactic society hung in the balance, and she had less than 24 hours to prevent a diplomatic catastrophe that could result in their expulsion from the Council. As she worked, one thought kept haunting her. What would happen when the Galactic Council realized that the footage they had seen represented only a small fraction of human military history? General Marcus Rodriguez arrived at the Galactic Council chambers within 18 hours of Ambassador Chen's emergency communication. As Earth's highest-ranking military officer and a veteran of the Luna campaign, he understood better than most how violence looked to those who had never experienced it. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 43 species gathered for an emergency session. Rodriguez noticed that several delegations had positioned themselves farther from the human section than usual. The Zephyrian ambassador actually flinched when Rodriguez nodded politely in his direction. Council Chairman Vorthak, a dignified Altarian whose silver scales indicated advanced age, called the session to order. "We gather today to address concerns raised about human historical documentation recently shared with the Galactic Military Academy." Rodriguez stood as protocol demanded. "Honored Chairman, members of the Council, I am here to provide context for materials that appear to have been misunderstood." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The crystalline delegate, whose body sparkled with agitation, chimed in harmonic tones that the translator rendered as, "General Rodriguez, our military analysts have reviewed the footage. Humans appear to have engaged in organized violence for thousands of years. This contradicts your species' claims of peaceful development." Rodriguez had anticipated this challenge. "Honored delegate, I won't deny our violent history. However, I would like to provide perspective that may have been missing from the raw footage." He activated his presentation device, displaying a timeline of human history. "What you observed were selected moments from our species' learning process. Each conflict taught us valuable lessons about the cost of war and the importance of peaceful resolution." The Vorthak military attaché, Cadet Thrix, raised multiple appendages. "General, our analysis shows humans consistently choosing to continue fighting even when wounded or facing certain death. This suggests a psychological adaptation to warfare that other species find unsettling." Rodriguez smiled sadly. "Cadet, may I ask how your species handles threats to your family units?" Thrix's translator crackled with confusion. "Threats? We have conflict resolution protocols, mediation systems. Violence against family units has been eliminated for millennia." "But hypothetically," Rodriguez pressed gently, "if someone threatened your offspring with immediate harm, and peaceful solutions were not available, what would you do?" The chamber fell silent. Most species had evolved beyond such scenarios so long ago that they struggled to comprehend the question. I would contact authorities," Thrix finally replied. "And if no authorities were available? If you were the only thing standing between your family and destruction?" Thrix's manipulators trembled. "I suppose I would try to protect them," Rodriguez nodded. The humans in those recordings were protecting their families, their nations, their way of life. When peaceful solutions failed, they chose to fight rather than surrender everything they loved. The Zephyrian delegate's feathers ruffled with agitation. "But General, the footage shows humans creating increasingly sophisticated methods of violence. Your species appears to have evolved warfare as a primary survival strategy." Rodriguez displayed new images: field hospitals, medics treating wounded enemies, soldiers sharing rations with civilians from opposing sides. "Honored delegate, did your analysts also note these moments? Humans caring for enemy wounded, protecting non-combatants, following rules of engagement even when it placed them at tactical disadvantage?" The chamber grew quiet as delegates consulted their own records. Many had focused only on the violence, missing the humanity embedded within it. Chairman Vorthak's scales shifted to a more neutral hue. General, these examples are illuminating. However, the concern remains that humans may apply these same capabilities against council members. Rodriguez had been waiting for this moment. Chairman, I'd like to share something that wasn't in the original footage. He activated a new recording. This one showed human forces during the Luna campaign, Earth's most recent military action before joining the council. But instead of combat footage, it showed human soldiers establishing refugee camps, sharing medical supplies with former enemies, and working alongside alien archaeologists to preserve artifacts discovered during the conflict. This represents humanity's most recent military engagement, Rodriguez explained. Notice how our tactical evolution has progressed. We still maintain the ability to fight when necessary, but we've learned to minimize casualties, protect civilians, and rebuild after conflict. The Krillian delegate, Veltar, raised her crystalline manipulator. General, this is reassuring, but it still demonstrates that humans maintain active military capabilities. Most council species have eliminated such forces entirely. Rodriguez expected this point. Delegate Veltar, may I ask how your species would respond to an external threat? A natural disaster, perhaps, or hostile contact with unknown entities? Veltar's crystals flickered uncertainly. We would coordinate response through proper channels, form committees, develop protocols, and if the threat required immediate action, if there wasn't time for committees? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Rodriguez could see the delegates beginning to understand the gap in their thinking. They had created peaceful societies by eliminating internal conflict, but they had no framework for handling external threats that couldn't be reasoned with. The Altarian chairman's scales shifted to deep blue, a sign of serious contemplation. General, are you suggesting that human military capabilities serve a protective function for the Council? Rodriguez chose his words carefully. Chairman, I'm suggesting that diversity of capabilities strengthens any alliance. Humans bring skills that complement the diplomatic and technological strengths of other species. A new voice entered the debate. The ethereal delegate, whose form shimmered with barely contained energy, spoke in resonant tones. The general raises an interesting point. Our species has focused on transcending physical limitations, but we've lost the ability to think tactically about survival scenarios. Rodriguez seized the opening. Honored ethereal, human military training isn't just about fighting. It's about rapid decision-making under pressure, resource management in crisis situations, and coordinating complex operations with limited information. These skills apply to many nonviolent challenges. He displayed examples. Human-led disaster response efforts, search and rescue operations, and infrastructure projects that required military-style logistics and coordination. Our capacity for violence comes with an equal capacity for protection and construction, Rodriguez continued. We've learned to channel our aggressive instincts into positive outcomes. Cadet Thrick spoke up again, sounding less hostile than before. General, the footage showed humans repeatedly risking their lives for others. Is this behavior typical of your species? Rodriguez smiled. Cadet, it's our defining characteristic. Humans will endure almost anything to protect something we care about. That includes our allies in the Galactic Council. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this statement. The same capacity for violence that had terrified them could potentially be directed toward their protection. Chairman Vorthak's scales shifted to a warmer golden hue. General Rodriguez, your presentation has provided valuable context. However, the Council must still address the concern that human military capabilities could pose a threat to member species. Rodriguez nodded respectfully. Chairman, I propose a simple solution. Allow Council observers to attend human military training exercises. Let them see firsthand how we've evolved our capabilities to serve protective rather than aggressive purposes. The suggestion created a buzz of conversation throughout the chamber. Several delegates seemed intrigued by the possibility of observing human military doctrine in a controlled environment. Additionally, Rodriguez continued, I'd like to invite council members to review our complete historical archives, not just selected combat footage. They'll see how each conflict led to greater understanding of warfare's costs and our commitment to avoiding unnecessary violence. As the session concluded, Rodriguez sensed a shift in the chamber's atmosphere. The fear remained, but it was now tempered with curiosity and the beginning of understanding. The next phase would be crucial, proving that humanity's capacity for war could serve the cause of peace. 6 months after the Titan base observations, the first signs of external threat emerged from the void reaches, the unexplored region beyond the Galactic Council's borders. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward Council space at unprecedented speeds. Admiral Sarah Chen, recently promoted after her diplomatic success, stood in the Council's new Strategic Command Center, alongside representatives from 23 species. The holographic display showed a fleet of unknown vessels, their design unlike anything in galactic databases. First contact protocols are not responding, reported the Altarian communications officer, his scales flickering with stress. The unknown vessels ignore all diplomatic transmissions and continue their approach. Chairman Vorthak's silver scales had darkened to deep gray. Admiral Chen, your species has the most recent experience with aggressive contact scenarios. What is your assessment? Sarah studied the tactical display with growing concern. The unknown fleet moved in perfect formation, maintaining radio silence while steadily approaching the Council's outer colonies. Their energy signatures suggested weapon systems far more advanced than anything in galactic space. Mr. Chairman, their behavior indicates hostile intent, she said carefully. They've ignored diplomatic overtures and are approaching our most vulnerable settlements. We need to prepare defensive measures immediately. The crystalline delegate chimed with anxiety. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting military action? We must continue diplomatic efforts. I agree about continuing diplomacy, Sarah replied, but we also need to position defensive assets to protect civilian populations. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The chamber buzzed with nervous discussion. Most Council species had no military vessels capable of engaging an advanced hostile force. Their defense fleets were primarily equipped for space traffic control and emergency response. Professor Zixith, now serving as military liaison from the Academy, approached Sarah privately. Admiral, based on our analysis of human military doctrine, what would you recommend? Sarah consulted her tactical staff, a mixed group of humans and alien observers who had studied human military methods. We need to evacuate civilian populations from the outer colonies while positioning our most capable vessels to buy time for diplomatic solutions. And if diplomacy fails? Zixith asked quietly. Sarah's expression hardened. Then we do what humans have always done. We protect what we care about. 3 days later, the unknown fleet reached the Proxima colony system. Their response to the Council's peaceful overtures was swift and devastating. They began systematically destroying orbital installations while jamming all communication attempts. Emergency. Broadcasts from Proxima showed scenes that horrified Council observers. The unknown attackers, tall insectoid beings with advanced combat armor, demonstrated tactics designed to maximize terror. They targeted civilian areas first, herded populations into confinement zones, and showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. They're called the Devourers, reported Colonel Martinez, who had been analyzing their combat patterns. Near as we can tell, they're a nomadic species that consumes entire civilizations for resources. Diplomacy isn't an option because they don't view other species as sentient, just as materials to be harvested. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Council chamber. For species that had achieved peace through understanding and cooperation, the concept of irredeemably hostile aliens was almost incomprehensible. Chairman Vorthak's scales had turned completely black, a sign of extreme distress in his species. Admiral Chen, the Council formally requests human assistance in developing a response to this crisis. Sarah had been expecting this moment. Mr. Chairman, humanity pledges its full support to the defense of Council space. However, we'll need authorization to coordinate military assets from all member species. You have it, Vorthak replied immediately. What do you require? Sarah activated her presentation system, displaying a comprehensive defense plan developed by human strategists. We recommend establishing 3 defense lines. The outer line uses long-range weapons to slow their advance. The middle line focuses on evacuating civilians while conducting fighting withdrawals. The inner line protects core worlds with concentrated firepower. The plan was elegant and ruthless, exactly what Council species had feared about human military thinking. But faced with the alternative of total annihilation, They found themselves grateful for humanity's capacity for strategic violence. Cadet Veltar, now a junior officer, raised her crystalline manipulator. "Admiral, our species' vessels aren't designed for combat. How can we contribute to this defense?" "Every species has capabilities we can use," Sarah replied. "Krillian ships have the most advanced sensor arrays, perfect for early warning systems. Forthec vessels have superior maneuverability for hit-and-run attacks. Ethereal technology can disrupt enemy communications." For the next 72 hours, the Council's improvised fleet prepared for humanity's first major military action since joining galactic civilization. Human tacticians worked around the clock to integrate alien technologies into effective combat formations. The preparations revealed just how much the Council had underestimated human military capabilities. Earth's peaceful exploration ships carried weapon systems that exceeded most species' defensive capabilities. Human soldiers demonstrated equipment and tactics that made even the Devourer's advanced technology seem manageable. But what surprised the alien observers most was how humans approached the coming battle. Instead of the bloodthirsty aggression they had feared, they witnessed careful planning focused on minimizing casualties while maximizing effectiveness. Sergeant Rodriguez, Professor Zixith, observed during a planning session, "You seem remarkably calm considering the approaching battle." Rodriguez looked up from her tactical display. "Professor, this is what we've trained for our entire lives. Not the fighting part, the protecting part. Every species in the Council has something worth defending." The sentiment was echoed throughout the human forces. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing to protect their friends. When the Devourer fleet reached the outer defense line, the Battle of the Seven Suns began with a coordinated strike that surprised both sides. The aliens had expected to face the scattered, uncoordinated resistance typical of species they had conquered before. Instead, they encountered a unified defense that combined the best technologies of 23 civilizations under human tactical coordination. The first exchange of fire lasted only minutes, but its results shocked everyone involved. The Devourer advance formation was decimated by precisely coordinated attacks from vessels they had dismissed as primitive. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Devourers encountered resistance that not only fought back effectively, but seemed to anticipate their tactics. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. "All units execute withdrawal to secondary positions. Well done." The alien observers had witnessed something unprecedented, a successful defensive action against a superior force. But as the Devourer fleet regrouped and resumed its advance, everyone knew the real test was yet to come. The Council had discovered that humanity's capacity for warfare could serve the cause of peace. Now they would learn whether it was enough to preserve the civilization they had all worked together to build. In the command center, Sarah studied intelligence reports about Devourer capabilities, while her staff coordinated the retreat to the second defense line. The enemy was adapting to their tactics faster than expected, and the window for evacuation was closing rapidly. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we're receiving communications from human colonies throughout Council space. They're requesting permission to join the defense fleet." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Civilian volunteers rushing toward danger to protect others. It was the most human response imaginable. "Grant the requests," she said finally, "but assign them to evacuation duties only. We protect people, not planets." As the defense fleet fell back toward the second line, leaving the Devourers to occupy empty worlds instead of populated ones, the true test of human military doctrine was about to begin. 6 months after the Titan base observations, the first signs of external threat emerged from the void reaches, the unexplored region beyond the Galactic Council's borders. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward Council space at unprecedented speeds. Admiral Sarah Chen, recently promoted after her diplomatic success, stood in the Council's new Strategic Command Center, alongside representatives from 23 species. The holographic display showed a fleet of unknown vessels, their design unlike anything in galactic databases. "First contact protocols are not responding," reported the Altarian communications officer, his scales flickering with stress. "The unknown vessels ignore all diplomatic transmissions and continue their approach." Chairman Vorthak's silver scales had darkened to deep gray. "Admiral Chen, your species has the most recent experience with aggressive contact scenarios. What is your assessment? Sarah studied the tactical display with growing concern. The unknown fleet moved in perfect formation, maintaining radio silence while steadily approaching the Council's outer colonies. Their energy signatures suggested weapon systems far more advanced than anything in galactic space. Mr. Chairman, their behavior indicates hostile intent, she said carefully. They've ignored diplomatic overtures and are approaching our most vulnerable settlements. We need to prepare defensive measures immediately. The crystalline delegate chimed with anxiety. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting military action? We must continue diplomatic efforts. I agree about continuing diplomacy, Sarah replied, but we also need to position defensive assets to protect civilian populations. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The chamber buzzed with nervous discussion. Most Council species had no military vessels capable of engaging an advanced hostile force. Their defense fleets were primarily equipped for space traffic control and emergency response. Professor Zixith, now serving as military liaison from the Academy, approached Sarah privately. Admiral, based on our analysis of human military doctrine, what would you recommend? Sarah consulted her tactical staff, a mixed group of humans and alien observers who had studied human military methods. We need to evacuate civilian populations from the outer colonies while positioning our most capable vessels to buy time for diplomatic solutions. And if diplomacy fails? Zixith asked quietly. Sarah's expression hardened. Then we do what humans have always done. We protect what we care about. 3 days later, the unknown fleet reached the Proxima colony system. Their response to the Council's peaceful overtures was swift and devastating. They began systematically destroying orbital installations while jamming all communication attempts. Emergency. Broadcasts from Proxima showed scenes that horrified Council observers. The unknown attackers, tall insectoid beings with advanced combat armor, demonstrated tactics designed to maximize terror. They targeted civilian areas first, herded populations into confinement zones, and showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. They're called the Devourers, reported Colonel Martinez, who had been analyzing their combat patterns. Near as we can tell, they're a nomadic species that consumes entire civilizations for resources. Diplomacy isn't an option because they don't view other species as sentient, just as materials to be harvested. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Council chamber. For species that had achieved peace through understanding and cooperation, the concept of irredeemably hostile aliens was almost incomprehensible. Chairman Vorthak's scales had turned completely black, a sign of extreme distress in his species. Admiral Chen, the Council formally requests human assistance in developing a response to this crisis. Sarah had been expecting this moment. Mr. Chairman, humanity pledges its full support to the defense of Council space. However, we'll need authorization to coordinate military assets from all member species. You have it, Vorthak replied immediately. What do you require? Sarah activated her presentation system, displaying a comprehensive defense plan developed by human strategists. We recommend establishing 3 defense lines. The outer line uses long-range weapons to slow their advance. The middle line focuses on evacuating civilians while conducting fighting withdrawals. The inner line protects core worlds with concentrated firepower. The plan was elegant and ruthless, exactly what Council species had feared about human military thinking. But faced with the alternative of total annihilation, they found themselves grateful for humanity's capacity for strategic violence. Cadet Veltar, now a junior officer, raised her crystalline manipulator. Admiral, our species' vessels aren't designed for combat. How can we contribute to this defense? Every species has capabilities we can use, Sarah replied. Krillian ships have the most advanced sensor arrays, perfect for early warning systems. Vorthak vessels have superior maneuverability for hit-and-run attacks. Ethereal technology can disrupt enemy communications. For the next 72 hours, the Council's improvised fleet prepared for humanity's first major military action since joining galactic civilization. Human tacticians worked around the clock to integrate alien technologies into effective combat formations. The preparations revealed just how much the Council had underestimated human military capabilities. Earth's peaceful exploration ships carried weapon systems that exceeded most species' defensive capabilities. Human soldiers demonstrated equipment and tactics that made even the Devourers' advanced technology seem manageable. But what surprised the alien observers most was how humans approached the coming battle. Instead of the bloodthirsty aggression they had feared, they witnessed careful planning focused on minimizing casualties while maximizing effectiveness. Sergeant Rodriguez, Professor Zixith observed during a planning session, "You seem remarkably calm considering the approaching battle." Rodriguez looked up from her tactical display. "Professor, this is what we've trained for our entire lives. Not the fighting part, the protecting part. Every species in the Council has something worth defending." The sentiment was echoed throughout the human forces. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing to protect their friends. When the Devourer fleet reached the outer defense line, the Battle of the Seven Suns began with a coordinated strike that surprised both sides. The aliens had expected to face the scattered, uncoordinated resistance typical of species they had conquered before. Instead, they encountered a unified defense that combined the best technologies of 23 civilizations under human tactical coordination. The first exchange of fire lasted only minutes, but its results shocked everyone involved. The Devourer advance formation was decimated by precisely coordinated attacks from vessels they had dismissed as primitive. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Devourers encountered resistance that not only fought back effectively, but seemed to anticipate their tactics. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. "All units execute withdrawal to secondary positions. Well done." The alien observers had witnessed something unprecedented, a successful defensive action against a superior force. But as the Devourer fleet regrouped and resumed its advance, everyone knew the real test was yet to come. The Council had discovered that humanity's capacity for warfare could serve the cause of peace. Now they would learn whether it was enough to preserve the civilization they had all worked together to build. In the command center, Sarah studied intelligence reports about Devourer capabilities, while her staff coordinated the retreat to the second defense line. The enemy was adapting to their tactics faster than expected, and the window for evacuation was closing rapidly. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we're receiving communications from human colonies throughout Council space. They're requesting permission to join the defense fleet." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Civilian volunteers rushing toward danger to protect others. It was the most human response imaginable. "Grant the requests," she said finally, "but assign them to evacuation duties only. We protect people, not planets." As the defense fleet fell back toward the second line, leaving the Devourers to occupy empty worlds instead of populated ones, the true test of human military doctrine was about to begin. The Battle of Kepler Station marked the turning point in the war against the Devourers. The massive orbital facility, originally built for scientific research, had been converted into a fortress protecting the evacuation routes from the inner colonies. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the command deck, watching the Devourer fleet approach. After 2 weeks of fighting withdrawals, both sides had learned to respect their opponent's capabilities. The aliens had adapted their tactics to counter human coordination, while the human-led coalition had developed new strategies to exploit Devourer weaknesses. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer flagship," reported Lieutenant Commander Thrix, the former Academy cadet who had joined Chen's staff after witnessing human military effectiveness. "On screen," Chen ordered, curious about what the aliens wanted to communicate after weeks of silence. The holographic display showed a towering insectoid figure covered in chitinous armor. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in cold, mechanical tones. "Human Commander, you have provided more resistance than expected. We offer terms for your species' survival." Chen stepped forward calmly. "I'm listening." "Your military capabilities are adequate. Join our expansion as warrior servants and we will spare human populations. You may continue to exist as our combat specialists while we harvest the other species." The bridge fell silent. Several alien officers looked toward Chen with barely concealed fear, not of the Devourers, but of humanity's potential response. The offer was exactly what they had always feared, humans choosing to preserve themselves through alliance with aggressors. Chen's reply was immediate and unwavering. "Counter-offer. Withdraw from Council space immediately, and we won't hunt you back to whatever hole you crawled out of." The Devourer commander's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. "You would sacrifice your own species for these inferior creatures?" They're not inferior, Chen replied. They're our friends. The transmission ended abruptly, and sensors immediately detected the Devourer fleet accelerating toward the station. The final battle was beginning. All units, this is Admiral Chen, she broadcast across the defense fleet. The enemy has made their intentions clear. Today we show them what happens when someone threatens our friends. The ensuing battle demonstrated the full evolution of human military doctrine. Instead of the frontal assaults that had characterized humanity's earlier conflicts, the defense fleet employed sophisticated tactics that leveraged each species' unique capabilities. Ethereal ships phased through enemy formations to disrupt their communications. Fourth-act vessels used their superior maneuverability to conduct hit-and-run attacks on Devourer flanks. Krillian sensor arrays provided targeting data that allowed human weapons to achieve impossible accuracy at extreme ranges. But what truly stunned the Devourer forces was the humans' tactical adaptability. Every time the aliens adjusted their strategy, the defense fleet seemed to anticipate the change and counter it immediately. Professor Zixith, observing from the command center, finally understood what made human warfare so effective. Admiral, your forces aren't just coordinating, they're thinking collectively. Chen nodded without taking her eyes off the tactical display. Professor, human military success has never been about individual superiority. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things together. The battle raged for 18 hours. Devourer forces, accustomed to overwhelming primitive defenses through superior technology, found themselves locked in a grinding attrition battle against an enemy that refused to break. The turning point came when Sergeant Rodriguez led a boarding action against the Devourer flagship. Using a combination of human assault tactics and alien technology, her mixed-species team penetrated the enemy vessel's defenses and disabled its command systems. Admiral, we've got control of their primary strategic computer, Rodriguez reported from inside the enemy ship. These bastards have detailed intelligence on 47 other civilizations they're planning to attack. Chen's expression hardened. The Devourers weren't just threatening the Council, they were planning to consume half the known galaxy. Rodriguez, can you transmit that data to the fleet? Already on it, ma'am. Also found something else you need to see. They've got human combat footage. They've been studying our tactics from the Academy recordings. The revelation explained the Devourers' rapid adaptation to human strategies. They had used Professor Zixith's original combat footage to prepare for fighting humans, never realizing that the recording showed humanity's primitive past rather than their current capabilities. All units, this is Admiral Chen, she broadcast. We've just learned that the Devourers are planning to attack dozens of other civilizations. This isn't just about defending Council space anymore. We're fighting for every peaceful species in the galaxy. The announcement galvanized the defense fleet. Alien crews who had been fighting for their homes now understood. They were fighting for the principle of peaceful coexistence itself. The final phase of the battle began when human forces executed a maneuver that no other species had ever attempted. Using precise coordination between multiple ship types, they created a tactical formation that concentrated the firepower of the entire fleet into a single devastating attack. The Devourer flagship, already damaged by Rodriguez's boarding action, couldn't withstand the coordinated assault. As it exploded, the remaining enemy vessels began to retreat in disorder. Admiral, reported the Krillian sensor operator, enemy fleet is withdrawing at maximum velocity. They're broadcasting some kind of warning signal. Chen studied the retreating aliens with grim satisfaction. They're telling their other fleets to avoid this region. Good. Maybe word will spread that some prey fights back. As the immediate threat ended, the command center erupted in celebration. Species that had never experienced military victory found themselves cheering, alongside human personnel who treated the battle as simply another successful protection mission. Chairman Vorthak's scales had returned to their natural silver as he approached Chen. Admiral, on behalf of the entire Council, I offer our deepest gratitude. You saved not just our civilization, but the principle of peaceful coexistence. Chen shook her head. Mr. Chairman, we saved each other. This victory belonged to everyone. Professor Zixth approached with his usual academic curiosity. Admiral, the Devourers offered to spare humanity in exchange for military service. Why did you refuse? Chen looked around the command center at the mixed crews of humans and aliens working together to coordinate rescue operations. Professor, humans learned a long time ago that some things are more important than survival. Friendship is one of them. As rescue ships moved out to assist damaged vessels and recover survivors, the true cost of the battle became clear. The defense fleet had suffered significant casualties, including both human and alien, personnel who had died protecting each other. But they had also accomplished something unprecedented. In galactic history, a coalition of peaceful species had successfully defended themselves against external aggression. The model of human military leadership integrated with alien capabilities had created a defensive force capable of protecting the Council's values without compromising them. The war was over, but its implications were just beginning. Word of the Council's victory would spread throughout the galaxy, reaching civilizations that had never imagined peaceful species could successfully resist aggressive expansion. Humanity had proven that their capacity for violence could serve the cause of peace. Now they would discover whether the galaxy was ready for that lesson. 1 year after the Battle of Kepler Station, the Galactic Council convened its largest assembly in recorded history. Representatives from 87 species filled the Great Chamber, including 44 civilizations that had recently joined after hearing about the Council's successful defense against the Devourers. Admiral Sarah Chen, now serving as the Council's first Director of Collective Defense, stood before the Assembly to present the annual security report. The transformation in the Chamber's atmosphere was remarkable. Where once there had been fear and suspicion of human military capabilities, now there was respect and gratitude. Fellow beings, Chen began, this year has shown us that peaceful coexistence requires more than good intentions. It requires the strength to defend our values when challenged. Professor Zix, now head of the expanded military academy, activated the holographic display showing the new Galactic Defense Network. 43 species had contributed ships, technology, and personnel to create an integrated force capable of protecting the expanded Council territory. The Academy now trains officers from 67 species in combined tactical operations, Zixith reported. What began as a study of human combat recordings has evolved into a comprehensive doctrine for defensive warfare. Cadet Veltar, recently promoted to commander after distinguishing herself in the Kepler battle, presented the tactical innovations developed over the past year. We've learned that every species contributes unique capabilities to collective defense. Crystalline computational power enhances targeting systems. Ethereal phase technology enables reconnaissance missions. Vorthak maneuverability provides rapid response capabilities. But the most significant development was psychological rather than technological. The Council had discovered that the mere existence of effective defensive capability deterred aggressive action. 3 separate hostile incursions had withdrawn when they detected the enhanced Galactic Defense Fleet. We've received communications from the Devourer remnants, Chen reported. They're warning other aggressive species to avoid Council space. Our reputation as the alliance that fights back is spreading throughout the galaxy. Chairman Vorthak's scales shimmered with pride as he addressed the assembly. The integration of human military doctrine with our collective capabilities has created something unprecedented. A peaceful civilization capable of defending itself without compromising its values. The success had attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Several former enemy species had requested permission to join the Council after witnessing how fairly the Alliance treated even hostile prisoners. The Devourer captives taken during the Kepler battle were receiving rehabilitation rather than punishment, with many choosing to remain as contributing members of Council society. Sergeant Rodriguez, now Colonel Rodriguez and director of the Cross-Species Military Integration Program, presented the personal stories that illustrated the deeper transformation. Humans have learned that our protective instincts work best when extended to include all sentient beings. Our alien colleagues have discovered that peaceful values can be defended through coordinated action. The Academy's new curriculum included mandatory courses in both conflict resolution and tactical thinking. Students learned to exhaust peaceful options before considering force, but also to apply force decisively when protection required it. M. Koth, the former cadet who had questioned human nature, now served as the Council's first alien strategic planning officer. The human approach to warfare has taught us that strength and compassion aren't contradictory. They're complementary. The Assembly viewed recordings from recent joint exercises where human tactical leadership, combined with alien technological superiority to create defensive scenarios that would have been impossible for any single species. The integration was so complete that it was becoming difficult to distinguish human innovations from alien contributions. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the Council viewed its role in the galaxy. Instead of simply maintaining internal peace, they now actively worked to extend protection to threatened civilizations throughout known space. "We've established the Galactic Protection Protocol," Chen announced. "Any peaceful civilization threatened by aggressive expansion can request Council assistance. We won't impose our values, but we will defend the right of others to choose their own path." The protocol had already been invoked 6 times, with Council forces providing defensive assistance to species that had never achieved spaceflight, but faced extinction from hostile neighbors. The operations demonstrated humanity's evolved military doctrine, overwhelming, defensive capability deployed with surgical precision to protect the innocent. Professor Zix shared the latest intelligence reports about galactic stability. Aggressive expansion has decreased by 67% in regions where Council influence is known. The mere possibility of organized resistance is changing the strategic calculations of potential aggressors. As the assembly concluded, delegates from the newest member species requested permission to speak. Representative Kex Dar of the Terminus Coalition, whose worlds had been saved from devourer attacks by Council intervention, addressed the chamber. "We came to this alliance seeking protection. We discovered something greater, a community where strength serves wisdom rather than dominating it. The humans showed us that warriors can be peacemakers, and peacemakers can be warriors when necessary." The sentiment was echoed by representatives from dozens of species who had joined the Council, not just for protection, but for the opportunity to contribute to an organization that embodied their highest ideals while maintaining the strength to defend. Admiral Chen's closing remarks reflected the transformation that had occurred since that first misunderstood viewing of human combat footage. "We've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice defended by those willing to protect it." As delegates departed for their home worlds, they carried with them a new understanding of humanity's place in galactic civilization. The species that had brought war to space had also brought something more valuable: the wisdom to wage peace. In the Academy's archives, Professor Zixith carefully stored the original combat recordings that had started everything. Future students would study them not as examples of primitive aggression, but as the first steps in humanity's evolution toward becoming the galaxy's protectors. The final entry in the Academy's official record summarized the transformation. Initial assessment: humans represent a dangerous warrior species. Revised assessment: humans represent hope for a galaxy where peaceful beings need never fear those who would destroy them. The misunderstanding that had nearly led to humanity's expulsion from the Council had instead revealed their true gift to galactic civilization: the strength to defend what they loved and the wisdom to love what deserved. Protection. Across the galaxy, aggressive species learned to avoid regions marked by the distinctive energy signatures of human-designed defensive platforms. The alliance that had once feared humanity's capacity for violence now celebrated it as the foundation of galactic peace. In the end, the aliens had been right about one thing: humans had brought war to space. But they had brought it as a shield, not a sword, wielded in service of the greatest military objective of all: a galaxy where force was unnecessary, because justice was defended by those strong enough and wise enough to protect it.